Bend Studios' Days Gone is a game whose only surprise is that it manages to execute on its lack of surprises rather well. There is nothing in Days Gone that feels new or different from other open-world action-adventure games that have been released over the past decade, and for the most part, that's okay. Days Gone is a fun game to play that mostly succeeds in creating an interesting zombie apocalypse, despite the weak first act, host of technical issues, and poor gunplay that hold it back. Set 2 years after a virus wiped out most of humanity and turned millions into zombie-like creatures called Freakers, Days Gone follows the journey of a bounty hunter and former outlaw biker named Deacon St. John. And over the course of the 40-hour storyline, Deacon finds himself mixed up in the escalating actions of a local cult, the remnants of the federal government's disaster relief group, and the struggle the survivors have at keeping hope alive in the face of a world that will slowly kill them. Days Gone can be divided into 3 acts, the first of which is a slog that does little to make you interested in the events of the game. If the first 8 or so hours were indicative of the rest of the game, Days Gone would be very disappointing. But much to my surprise and relief, that's not the case. Once Deacon begins traveling outside the starting areas, Days Gone begins to improve ever so slowly. That's not to say that the story is particularly great. The climax to Act 2 drags down what was to that point a rather interesting storyline, for example, but it did make me want to see its conclusion. Sam Witwer, who voices Deacon, also deserves praise, as he's able to bring a sense of pain and vulnerability to a character who looks on the outside to be just another gruff badass who feels nothing. By the time Days Gone ended, I actually started to care about the former outlaw biker and his gang of mismatched survivors, even if the pain caused by the sluggish opening act never really goes away. While the story may improve, the shooting is another matter entirely. Using an over-the-shoulder third-person perspective, Days Gone plays like a typical cover shooter. Regardless of whether you're using the starting pistol or a military-grade assault rifle, however, the gunplay in Days Gone is uniformly weak. Aiming with the reticle feels imprecise, even when you're standing still and crouched to make the target as small as possible. Firing a gun also lacks impact, and shooting things never feels good unless you're using the most powerful sniper rifles in the game. And you'll be shooting a lot of things, whether they be freakers, marauders, or infected animals, which means you're going to have to deal with the poor aiming and gunplay constantly. Of course, you don't have to run in guns blazing all the time. Stealth is a major component of Days Gone, particularly in the early game when you're lacking good weapons and tools. Using a simplified cover system that makes use of both sound and sight, you can sneak through camps and pick off drifters or freakers one by one with ease. Stealth kills are always one-hit KOs, but due to the lack of upgrades in the skill tree that facilitate stealth, make it only viable for either the first act or the very end of the game, when enemies come equipped with heavier weapons and take way too many bullets to put down. The human enemies may get better gear as time goes on, but the freakers are the true stars of the show. Much like 28 Days Later or World War Z zombies, freakers are fast, numerous, and don't need to be shot in the head to die. Infected animals such as wolves and bears also keep things fresh and exciting, though the most dangerous enemies are hordes. These are large groups of freakers who are so numerous they have their own health bar that only disappears when every last freaker in the group is killed. Battling a horde is the most exciting part of Days Gone because it requires far more than good shooting to defeat them. These fights are intense, and I always felt like I conquered them by the skin of my teeth. And while they're not common, hordes present enough of a threat that you're always kept on your toes while exploring. Similarly, driving your motorcycle across the Oregon wilderness is consistently a highlight in Days Gone. There's a weight to your bike that you can feel with every bump in the road or dirt, and different types of terrain change how your bike handles. You get attached to your bike quickly, and it's a strong contender for being the best part of the game. Which brings me to the crux of Days Gone. It has everything that you'd come to expect from a modern AAA action-adventure game. Yet from a technical standpoint, Days Gone struggles. I played on a base PS4, and textures were often slow to load both in cutscenes and in gameplay. Clothing in particular often looks muddy, taking far too long to appear as anything more than a mess of polygons, which is very distracting. Objects routinely pop into vision while driving, and I found myself crashing thanks to the sudden appearance of a car more often than not. While you will regularly see Deacon clip through his bike and through hills as he climbs them, more worrying are the instances where you clip through bridges in the middle of a mission and plummet to your death, and this happened to me on multiple occasions. Several times, I would ride up to an encampment, discover there were no enemies, only for a group of marauders or occasionally an entire horde of freakers to spawn directly next to me from out of nowhere. But the worst thing to deal with is the stuttering. Not 10 minutes went by without some form of stuttering in the gameplay or cutscenes, as if Days Gone was struggling to keep up with a bike speeding down the road or a horde of freakers chasing after Deacon. Even in scenes that I assumed weren't resource intensive, like slowly walking through a camp, the game stuttered. Much like the slowly loading textures, this is distracting to look at. Unlike the textures, this has an impact on how I played the game, and I failed objectives and even died outright because the game either skipped some pivotal frames or froze for several seconds before it kicked back to life. While Days Gone never crashed for me, it certainly wasn't for a lack of trying. Despite my problems with Days Gone, however, I can't say that it's a bad game by any stretch of the means. It's often overwhelming, too lost as it is in the big picture to see that it's at its best when it has time to focus on a single scene or a single concept. With the sheer amount of things to do in Days Gone, you're likely to spend a lot of time in post-apocalyptic Oregon, completing checklists and searching for every last secret. However, no matter how long you stay here, it likely won't stick with you. Days Gone is a perfectly fine game. Nothing more, and nothing less.